Have you ever felt like you were born for something bigger? Like you have a real purpose? I think we've all felt that at some point.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's the feeling lots of people have. And it's a big part of Jeremiah's story. This guy who got a very specific, and get this, pre-birth assignment from God.
Okay, wait, pre-birth assignment. You're gonna have to explain that one. So who was this Jeremiah?
Well, Jeremiah's job was to be a prophet, to speak God's words. The thing is, the nation he was speaking to, they really didn't want to hear it. And it's super interesting, this whole idea of destiny, that God had a plan for Jeremiah before he was even born. You don't see that a lot in the Bible. We're talking like before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Level serious.
Wow, so this wasn't just any old prophet, huh? This was like the prophet. Okay, I'm starting to see why we're doing a deep dive on this, but if this was God's plan all along, I think Jeremiah would have been all in, ready to go, right?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting. Jeremiah's response is so human. You know, like anyone could relate to it. He's like, I don't know how to talk to people. I'm too young for this. It's almost like he's saying, God, are you sure you picked the right guy?
Phew, that makes me feel better. I was starting to feel a little inadequate myself. What's my big purpose? But Jeremiah being hesitant, that makes him seem way more like me, not some super-powered prophet.
Totally. And it brings up a big question for us. What potential does God, or maybe the universe, or even just that voice inside us, what do they see in us that we're missing? What are we too scared to try or too unsure of ourselves to go for?
Wow, that's already got me thinking. But I gotta know, what happens next with Jeremiah? Does he, accept the whole prophet thing?
Yeah, he does, but it's not going to be easy. In chapters 2 and 3, we see this incredible metaphor. It's like a broken marriage to show the relationship between God and Israel.
A broken marriage. Now, that's not what I was expecting.
I know, right? It's not just a king and his people. It's way more personal than that. And the way God talks about his people, how they turned away to worship other gods, it's heartbreaking, honestly.
You were talking about idolatry, right? That was a big deal back then, wasn't it?
Huge. Like, imagine a whole culture where everyone worships idols, physical things, and it's just part of everyday life. To turn away from that would have been radical, totally changed society. And for God, after choosing Israel, protecting them, taking care of them, it felt like the ultimate betrayal.
Yeah, I can see why God would use a broken marriage to describe it. That feeling of hurt and betrayal, it's real. There's that line, what did your ancestors find wrong with me that they went so far away? It sounds like he's genuinely hurt and confused.
Exactly. And it makes you think, what are the idols in our lives? What things do we put before our values, our relationships, even our own well-being?
That's a good question. I think we all have our idols in a way, the things we think are super important, even if they're not really good for us in the long run. It makes you think about that feeling of drifting, moving away from what really matters.
Yeah, that brokenness, that drifting away, that's what leads to the urgent warnings we see in the next chapters. God's trying to get his people's attention, like, wake up, you're in danger.
Okay, so we went from this pre-birth calling to a broken marriage. Where do these warnings fit in? I'm kind of nervous to find out.
Oh, get ready for some seriously intense imagery. Chapters 4 through 6, Jeremiah really lets loose. We're talking like a lion's coming out of its den. A destroyer of nations is on the move.
Whoa, okay, that's a little scary. Was there like an actual lion running around?
Not literally, no. But think about the people hearing this, right? Back then, a lion, a destroyer, that meant real danger. They were powerful symbols, meant to like shake people up, get them out of their comfort zones.
So it was more of a wake-up call, like, hey, pay attention, not so much a lion on the loose.
Exactly. Like a friend grabbing you and saying, hey, you're heading down a bad road, turn around. And it's not just about punishment either. God wants to fix things, wants people to come back to him.
So these warnings, they weren't supposed to like scare people into following God. It was more about helping them, getting them back on track.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, think about a parent who has to discipline their kid. It's not because they enjoy it. It's because they love them and want what's best. There's this line in chapter 5, wash the evil from your heart and be saved. It's about changing from the inside, not just doing the right things on the outside.
I'm seeing a pattern here. First, the broken marriage thing, and now this washing away evil from the heart. Sounds like God really cares about what's going on inside us, not just what we do, huh?
Oh, absolutely. Real change, it always starts on the inside. It's about making our hearts line up with God's will, not just going through the motions. But there's this sad irony, too, in chapter 5. God's people, they're so used to doing the wrong thing. Their hearts are so hard they can't even hear God anymore.
Oh, wow. That's kind of creepy. It's like they've gone spiritually deaf, tuned God out completely.
And that's something we still do today, sadly. Think about how easy it is to just ignore stuff that makes us think or feel uncomfortable. We scroll past news we don't like, unfollow people we disagree with, surround ourselves with people who only think like us.
You're totally right. I know I do that sometimes. It's easier to stay in our little bubbles than face ideas that challenge us. But like you said, we might miss out on learning and growing that way.
Exactly. We could be missing out on important truths just because they're tough to hear. It's hard to be open-minded, to really listen to people who see things differently than us.
This is making me see those warnings in a whole new way. It's not just God being mad or wanting to punish people, it's like a desperate plea to get through to them before it's too late.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It's like God saying, I'm trying to reach you, but you're not listening. Wake up before you destroy yourself.
So even though these warnings are intense, there's still hope and love underneath it all. God doesn't give up on his people, even when they push him away.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that leads us to a beautiful part in chapter 6. God says, stand at the crossroads and look around. As for the old paths, where the good way is, and walk in it.
Ancient paths. What do you think those look like for us today? That really gets me thinking. Ancient paths. I love that. Like going back to the basics, the stuff that really matters. But what does that even look like now in this crazy world we live in?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? I think it starts with realizing those ancient paths. They're not about like strict rules or old traditions. It's about connecting with those timeless ideas, the ones that have always helped people find wisdom, kindness, and purpose.
So it's not so much what would Jeremiah do, but more like what were the big ideas Jeremiah was trying to show us?
Exactly. Figuring out what really matters, In the big picture, it's asking ourselves, what are the ancient paths we've wandered away from? Have we chosen things that make us feel good for a minute instead of real joy? Have we built our lives on, stuff and ego instead of love and helping others?
It's like we need to do some soul searching, dig down deep and find those basic truths that we might have forgotten about.
I love that. Soul searching. Yeah. I think Jeremiah would like that too. Remember, he wasn't just telling people to follow certain rituals. He was calling them back to a real relationship with God and with each other, to fix what was broken and rebuild their lives on love and fairness.
Okay, so we've gone through these first 6 chapters of Jeremiah. We met a prophet who didn't really want the job, saw this broken marriage metaphor, and heard some pretty serious warnings. What are the big things we should remember?
Well, first off, God's purpose for us is personal. Just like he knew Jeremiah way before he was born. He knows each of us, really knows us. He sees what we can do, even when we don't believe in ourselves.
I needed to hear that today. It's easy to compare ourselves to other people and feel like we're not good enough. But knowing that God has a plan for us, a unique one, that makes all the difference.
For sure. And that leads to the second thing. God's love never gives up. Doesn't matter how far we go, how many mistakes we make, he's always there waiting for us.
That's good to know, especially after hearing about how Israel turned away from God. Even when they messed up big time, he was still there wanting them back.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful picture of grace and forgiveness, right? It reminds us that we can always come back no matter what.
Okay, so we've got God's unique purpose for us and his never-ending love. What's the third big takeaway?
This one might be a little tougher. God's warnings, they're actually invitations. They're not meant to make us feel bad, but to wake us up, grab our attention, and point us in the right direction.
That's a lot to think about. I still struggle with seeing God's warnings as invitations. It's easy to see them as, punishment.
It is, but I think it goes back to understanding God's heart. He doesn't want to punish us. He wants to keep us safe. Those warnings are like a big flashing red light, telling us we're about to hit danger. And the invitation is to turn around, choose a different path, one that leads to life and wholeness.
So even when God sounds angry or disappointed, there's still love and concern there. He's not trying to scare us. He's trying to help us see the truth about our choices and what might happen because of them.
Exactly. Like when a parent disciplines their kid, it's out of love, not anger. The discipline might not feel good, but it's for their own good in the end.
Wow, these first 6 chapters of Jeremiah have been a journey. We've talked about destiny, broken relationships, and warnings that are really invitations. It's about faith, doubt, and ultimately the amazing love of God.
It really is. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I have a question for you, our listener. If Jeremiah was talking to you today, right here, right now, what do you think he'd say? What ancient paths have we lost track of in our world? And how can we find our way back?
That's a question worth thinking about. And as you do, remember, God has a special purpose for you. His love will never let you go. And his warnings, well, they're actually his way of inviting you to experience the amazing life he has planned for you.